everyone, I'm Sloan from SloanBella.com and I am back with another channeled celebrity video. This video is a very requested video. I get lots of emails about this young man who passed away at the age of 25 on January 15th of 2008. Hard to believe because he was born on July 25th of 1982. And when I started to focus on his energy, he was very conservative about how he chose to come through. And his energy was telling me, like, I'm not that person. Like, why do you want to talk to me? Why do you want to know me? So he was like, I'm not the same person. I never was that person. So I was very interested in learning how he came to this conclusion. And I'm talking about the young actor named Brad Renfro, who starred in the movie The Client when he was either 10 or 11 years old. Now, when I looked at his chart, and I'm just going to do a brief chart here, of course, he's a Leo sun, not of course, but, you know, July 25th of 1982, making him a Leo sun. Placed in the 6th house, conjuncting Mercury. That told me a lot about his intellect. He was probably a lot smarter than he let on, and things got him bored very easily. And had he lived a long life, he would have morphed into several different careers as his intellect dictated for him. Now, he was a Pisces rising. Pisces rising is fantastic for anybody in the entertainment field because it allows them to mesh with their characters, to become another person that doesn't exist or does exist or is written about. But the issue with him was on a moral spectrum, philosophically moral, because he had the ruling planet of movies up in his 10th house, retrograde in the sign of Sagittarius, squaring his ascendant. So his whole life was about, how do I walk that line between what I want on a soul level and what I really want on a soul level. This kid's very contemplative. And what I do on an earthbound level. Now, his moon was in Libra, and here's the kicker to his very karmic chart. He had a stellium in Libra, which is 4 or more planets placed in the same sign. However, one of those planets is technically a luminary. It was the moon, but it was moon conjunct Saturn, conjunct Pluto, conjunct Mars, conjunction married to. So these planets traveled in a pack in his 8th house. Jupiter was living just on the other side in the 9th house, in the sign of Scorpio, and we had Venus in Cancer in the 5th house. Now that stood out to me particularly because it does say in a relationship, either the person who owns the Venus in Cancer or the other person that they date, it'll be a parent-child interaction. With that loaded 8th house, that gives credence to the 10th house Neptune because it causes him to actually, on a completely raw and moral focus, what it is he's going to do, because this is a karmic playback from the most immediate past life, and it connected to his mother. Moon conjunct Saturn, direct karma in the 8th house. Saturn in the 8th house to me is indicative of early childhood sexual abuse, whether it be from a family member, a neighbor, a relative, which is a family member, or somebody in the neighborhood, an unknown person. But the undercurrent of a loaded 8th house with all your karmic planets, Saturn and Pluto conjuncting the moon, and then your Mars, your masculinity, is going to bring about the energy of trying to balance the mother's ancestral issues. So what happened to the mother? What happened in her family? How does the energy morph under the current, and how does it affect the child, since Mars is conjuncting that in the 8th house? So I wanted to find out about this young man. I'm very curious about his chart. That's a very, very intense chart. But he was very shy or conservative or cautious about coming through. He basically gave me the impression that he was like, why y'all want to know who I am? Why y'all want to know who I am? Like, I'm not that person. And then he said to me, again, I never was that person. So I started to feel the energy, and with him, it's very vibrant, and I kind of morph into his energy. So he's very visual, and emotional. So I go between getting images and feeling his energy. But what I understood him to be saying is he's not the person that they made him out to be, and he never was. And he went straight to his drug addiction, and he basically started showing me why he did drugs. But before I get into that, I want to go back to the beginning because I wanted to know how he got this movie part. I mean, in The Client, and it's a huge blockbuster film, and he was a kid that admittedly didn't have any acting experience, didn't really know anybody, and somehow got into this film. But he says him and his buddies, this is what he says, my friends, and he shows me himself as a little kid, 10 or 11, with a cigarette in his mouth. I'm like, take the cigarette out of your mouth. He wanted to be big and he wanted to be scary is how he words it. Like, I wanted to give the impression that I was a grown-up, and he was basically mimicking the males that he saw in his life. But he showed me this part of where he lived that was either a campsite or a picnic area, but it was rural, and the crew was there. He keeps talking about the crew. The crew of the movie was there, and I think this is before they even started filming. I got the impression that this is when the location scouts came out and the crew. So he's kind of saying it was a big, exciting thing in the community because this big movie is going to come to town and they're going to film. So he wanted to get in on that. He wanted to see what that was about. So him and his very, very kind of new agey James Dean character, that kind of how he represents it, comes wandering in with his friends, and somebody in the crew takes a liking to him and takes him back to meet a director. I don't know that it was the actual director of the movie because he's saying a director. So I'm assuming it's an assistant director. And for some reason, I literally feel once they saw this boy, they kicked the other boy out of the film. I don't know who they'd hired before him. I've never read anything about that, but I feel like they kicked another kid out of the film. This is not when the movie was filming. This is before, but it's like the crew was there and he's curious. His friends were there and everybody wanted to be a big star in the movie. He's talking about him and his 3 other buddies. So there's 4 of them. Want to be a big star, want to be a big star, want to hit that movie thing. So he meets this director, who I really have to say is probably maybe a production director, an assistant director, but not the main guy. And he says, you know, he's talking to him, and I can see them on a picnic table, and I can see them kind of talking. There's campers around. I don't know if the crew was sleeping in campers, or if they were literally in a campground, or if he lived in a campground, but this is how it feels to me. Then he's saying, and he's kind of telling me that as this is systematically going down in his mind, and he's not denying that he comes from a family where there was a lot of conversation that never happened, is what he's saying. So he's saying between his mother and father, the conversation was not good. And he's basically saying the rest of the family members and somebody on the dad's side had already kind of crossed boundaries with him. So before he even got into the movie industry, he was ripe for the picking, which I believe is how they spotted him. But what he shows me is like kind of unbelievable, because I'm like, who hired you, right? Like, did a manager come in? Who came in and hired you? As I'm saying, who? He shows me the image of an owl up in a tree, a big, big bird of prey up in a tree. This bird of prey is overseeing everything. So I'm taking it to mean that this person was the head of the studio, a head of a studio, I'm not sure which, but something along those lines, like a person in control and overseeing everything. And what he shows me is a mouse way, way off in the distance. And he shows me that owl going after the mouse, plucking it up, tossing it back, and playing with it, but not killing it. He said he was the mouse. This is what he said. This is what he's saying to me. I'm the mouse. So he is saying that he is the mouse. And as such, he walked into this career already being prey for the higher ups. I take it to be at the studio because I can't think of who it is. I mean, it's nobody on the crew, it's above them. And this person hides up in a tree in the dark, has eyesight like this, can catch something 100 yards away, kill it, crush it, throw it back, play with it, pick it up again, and terrorize it. This is how he's wording it to me. So he's saying that he went through the cordial of meeting everybody, and just, he had no acting ability is what he's saying, other than he was a kid with his own personality. And as he was stepping into this, he was so excited, like super excited. And it's a real shame they took that excitement away from him, but he was very excited about it. One of his little friends, and I don't know who Tom is, but he uses the name Tom, but one of his little friends got a bit part in the movie, but he got showered with movie stuff. And he looks kind of down at himself, and he basically is pointing out the fact that it's because they wanted him to be the prey. This is what he's saying. I'm sure he doesn't mean whoever spotted him, whoever saw him. They had hired somebody else, and then he took over that person's part. Now he's talking about doing the movie, and it started there. There were boundaries being removed. He didn't get everything that they promised him. Contracts were drawn up. The parents were exceedingly happy about this. And then he's basically saying, nobody paid attention to me after that. Like literally, nobody paid attention to me. So I was on my own. So he was like a little scrappy pappy kid without being scrappy. He really isn't. And he's very humble and kind of observes things and sees things. What he does show me totally sideways to this whole thing is he shows me a young child, a daughter on the other side. So besides having a child on this side where he says, I cannot believe that I did the same thing to my son that my mother did to me. Like I abandoned and left. But he's also letting me know that he raised a daughter, is raising a daughter on the other side. That tells me within 3 years of his passing that somebody terminated a pregnancy. So because there's a spirit child, female, on the other side that grows with him. He is a father on the other side. He is a father here. That's a hard concept to grasp, but that's what he's saying. So he has a daughter over there, and he has a son down here. Now and I don't think it's the same person. I think this is somebody else, and they chose not to go through with the pregnancy. He is also talking about when his mother crossed over, that he was actually able to meet with her, and he shows me hugging her in his arms, and basically saying that what she experienced is what he experienced. So these two souls kind of lived in tandem and struggle because the same things happened to them, but in different ways. So it's like the outcome is the same, but it happened for different reasons in each of their lives. So he's basically showing me that once his mother came over, he healed with her. That's why he's holding her like that. He's saying, I healed her with her. I healed our relationship. That's what it is. He healed the connection between the two of them. Now he goes back to the movies, and here's what he's saying, and I'm going to say this. About 3 years, 2-3 years after he did the movie The Client, okay? So he's 10 or 11. I can't remember which. Young kid. So he gets hooked up with a group of directors. Hear me clearly. A group. Not one, not two, more. A group. Not just people hiring him, but them and their buddies. Then he's showing me himself in like an open short sleeve top. He's a kid. 11, 12, 13, whatever. He's a kid. And he's wearing boxer swim shorts, like swim trunks, not Speedos, swim trunks. And he's walking through somebody's backyard, pool party, okay? So I'm thinking kids, family, whatever. No, he's being passed around by this group of directors that are abusing him and his friends sexually. My friends that didn't get in the movie, the other boys that didn't get to go as far in their career, those boys are lucky is what he's saying, because he began to feel like he was an imposter, using the word imposter syndrome. That's what I heard in my head. Imposter syndrome. Like people are taking pictures of me. People think I'm some great person. I feel like I'm not that person, and I don't know why you're looking at me like that. I'm not who you think I am. He wore it all over him, and it got very, very sickening very, very quickly for him. These directors, he uses the word directors, were using the boys, not just him, a bunch. He's like, it's a who's who of Boys Town. It's Boys Town. It's not Man's Town. It's Boys Town. He wants to be very clear on that. Definitely Boys Town, okay? Boys Town. When he overdosed, because apparently he overdosed of a heroin overdose, when he overdosed, he shuts down the right side of his head. So whatever drugs he did, and I didn't mean to do that, that's not what I wanted to do, that was not my intention, but he shows me something, either the blood got constricted or there was a stroke on the right side of the head, okay, which is interesting, it's the masculine side of the body. So the right side of his head, like, stroked out or got a stroke, meaning this is how he became unconscious after doing the drugs. But here's what's interesting. I'm like, why did you do the drugs? I want to know why. I know there's trauma connected to it, but some people don't. So I wanted to know why heroin. I mean, of all things. And he kind of laughingly said it wasn't just heroin. I did anything and everything I could do, but not at the time that I died. I was trying, and he's showing me probably, I'm going to say 2 months before he died, he was in contact with somebody from the studio, somebody that knew he was a good actor, a good kid actor, a movie star, okay? But somebody that also knew about those directors and Boys Town. That's what he's saying. And it was brought up to him again. And it was brought up to him that he was too old, too used up. So he felt like a woman, I'm just equating with this. He felt like a woman that, you know, had 4 kids with somebody, and the guy goes off and dates somebody who's 20 years younger, and she's left with no money, no nothing, and she's just an aging mother of children, which is important, but she feels very betrayed. He's pointing that out. I was too old, and I wasn't in my prime anymore. Now we're talking about somebody who's 25 years old, but when he looks at his body, he couldn't stand his body, he says, from what they did to him, meaning he walked in with a certain amount of bravado and like, I can handle myself, and it got way out of control. And once it was out of control, and once he did what he did, he hated himself for it. This is what he's saying. So the trauma comes from that. The trauma comes from that. He's also showing me that at the time that he died, whoever called him was triggering him or bringing up information from that time frame, making him feel shitty. And he was like, ah, fuck it, I'm just gonna do it. This is it. He always had a temper. I'm gonna put it in words as probably that Leo temper. He had that temper, like, just fuck it, I don't want to deal with this. So he kind of just went straight back into what he knew. I'm just gonna do it a little bit. But here's the thing that he's seeing from the other side that he didn't see then. A lot of what this guy was saying was actually triggering him. So he was having flashbacks while they were using almost verbal intent cues, or he's kind of trying to show me like it was a setup kind of to fry his brain like this so that he wouldn't talk about things. I think whatever he said, he was like, well, fuck you, I'm going to tell him what happened and I'm not afraid. So he was stepping into his power. He was trying to step into his power, but he got sideswiped by a conversation. And that's how I want to word it. It's like being pushed off a ledge. He got sideswiped. And when he got sideswiped, he was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I just don't want to do this. I ask about what it feels like to do the drugs, and he shows me his body, the physical, that he doesn't like. He does not like looking in the mirror. He does not like what he sees. He thinks everybody can read it on him and see it on him, okay? So he's basically saying he felt dirty. This is a boy that was sexually abused all through his career by directors in Hollywood. That's basically what it is. And he's basically saying he was picked for Boys Town. That's what I just heard. Anyhow, I ask him about the drugs. So he shows me his physical body, and he shows me his auric field or aura around his body, the ethereal body, but the aura. So here's the physical, the aura is out here, and there's this space in between. But how does he get out so he can feel better? That's why he did heroin and all the drugs. He needs to get out and to get around that so that he can feel better and connected to who he is. Because I wasn't that person that you saw on camera. I wasn't that person that they interviewed. I was never that person. They made me, and I was a fraud. Well, I'm going to say he wasn't. I argued all day with him in my head. Like, you're not a fraud. You did the work. But he's saying I felt like a fraud because I was afraid that people could see what went on and therefore they wouldn't value me. So this was like a combination of abandonment issue, childhood trauma from the family, ancestral family trauma, and then combined trauma going into the movie industry, but a little bit after the client, where he was targeted for his looks and passed around executives, directors, and whoever that owl is that keeps picking him up and dropping him like a mouse. I have no idea. I don't know who financed his movies, meaning what network or what studio. But I would almost hazard to say that the studio that financed the movie The Client is where the owl lives, at the head of that. So look that up, because I didn't even look that up. Anyway, as he passed, he's saying, I'm so much better here. And then he shows me what he's doing now. So he shows me what he's doing. He's been around his child on earth the entire time. Not a day went by where he didn't try to send that energy. And I'm thinking that child has to be 2008, whatever, 10, 15, 16 years old, 17, maybe even older. I don't even know when that boy was born, but he's showing the energy of watching and seeing and observing. He's also saying, I feel like from what I'm picking up, that he was with a different woman than his baby mama at the time that he died, because it feels like there's a disconnect, or he was seeing many women. I feel like he might have been seeing many women because he was trying to get that out of him, what was going on with him internally. Very, very sad. And he doesn't like to see himself on film at all. He recognizes it from an objective point, but he just doesn't like to see that. He doesn't like to see that person. He doesn't like to see them. He doesn't want to acknowledge that. It's like he wants to shut it out. That person's dead. Very literally, that person's dead, and they never got my soul. They didn't get my soul. I am real now. I wasn't real there. See, when you abuse somebody in a career like that, you basically set them up not only for the trauma of the sexual abuse, but you set them up to think that they have no skill and no ability, because if they had skill and ability, they would have been hired on their skill and ability. But it wasn't that. He was broken in Boys Town, is what he says. They took videos of me. They took pictures of me. They passed me around like an old rag. They passed him around like that. That is where the drug addiction led to. Not because he's like a drug addict per se. This is a trauma issue. So I'm going to say this. Anytime you find an addict, you might want to look at the trauma that they suffered, because the addict is a version of the trauma they suffered. This is how it's coming through to me. And he's like, I was never that person. He was hoping, what he's saying is, before he died, he talked to somebody at the network studio, somebody that he had worked with, somebody who he felt to be kind, somebody like this. And he basically said, I need to work. I need to do work. Like, can you hire me? And this person is saying, no, you're too old, like the middle-aged woman. You're too old. We can't hire you. No longer sexy. He was 25, but this is what he's saying. And it hurt him and betrayed him so much because he needed income and no one stepped up to give him that. Then there's a second call. Whoever the second call is from is somebody that's basically inadvertently threatening him by releasing what went on, which he was definitely not ready. There was one woman that he was with, or one young lady that he was with in his life, that he could be really confident in and really confide in. And I don't feel it was anybody he was dating at the time that he died, but he had one confidant that he was very comfortable being with. And that's what he's saying. And she accepted him for who he might have been his kid's mom. I'm not clear. Long dark hair is all I see, just long dark hair. But he confided and told her his secrets, and she accepted his secrets. Nobody else did. Nobody else did. And he was so angry. He was pissed off. That's where he was brutally pissed off. So he was so pissed off at himself, he had to get out of his physical body because it was so uncomfortable, and he'd almost made it, and then he got triggered. So he's basically saying that his life here was not as he saw it. It was not the way that he acknowledged it. It had nothing to do with who he was. It wasn't the essence. Once he died, he realized the essence of who he was, who I am. And it wasn't this person here. This was temporary. He's talking about having healed himself, and he's basically showing me somebody who would be considered on the other side, and I'm going to use the word like a clergy person, but I'm using that very, very broadly. he is a healer of sorts, and he learned how to do what he wanted to do, which was to transform the energy of his life through actions on the other side and help other people transform their energy when they cross over and they don't like what or how they behaved here due to the energies of others' manipulation. So he's kind of in that niche where when they cross over and they have a problem where they hold themselves accountable for situations that perhaps were not quite as they seem. So he shows me that, and then he shows me the young girl who by the way, whoever the mother is, the girl had like brown wavy hair. She might have been Hispanic a little bit, but the baby daughter, and the eyes are light, like they flash light, so a light hazel eyes on this baby girl. She grows up with him on the other side. This was a termination of a pregnancy on the female's part, and I don't even know if he knew, but he knows now, and that baby's over there. So whoever that is, I'm speaking to that person because he's basically raising a child on the other side. Such a good boy. He likes the idea of helping. His power is not in being scrappy anymore. His power is in helping those that need to learn how to accept their own strength and power and to move past what they consider to be their weakness or trauma in this life. That's what he's doing. And I really feel like I'm speaking energy, and it has a lot to do with what he experienced when he was doing drugs and how he got out of his body and what that feeling was like. But it's over there, not here. So that is my video, very briefly, on Brad, the little kid from the movie The Client. And once again, my name is Sloan from SloanBella.com.